5, 4.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world today, as you've joined us for the Information Systems Security Association Los Angeles chapter January 13th meeting. We've been doing these virtual meetings since early last year, obviously, and I want to welcome everybody. We've got a really exciting panel today. I'm very pleased, and we're very fortunate to have various people from law enforcement. A little bit about ISSA before we get going. ISSA was founded by the Los Angeles chapter over 30 years ago, and our goal is to promote CIA, not the one similar to law enforcement, but the one that you're familiar with if you're in our field. I want to give a shout out to a wonderful group of people who donate lots of hours of their time for free for helping the community, putting on events such as this and our wonderful security summit, which hopefully we'll be able to put on at some point in the not too distant future, where we pride ourselves on the greatest speakers and wonderful networking opportunities. I would suggest you join our community if you have not already. Go to our website, very simple, ISSA-LA.org. On the upper right, there'll be a button you can click to join us. Stay connected with your fellow InfoSec professionals and find out about all the cool events that we have. We had a wonderful happy hour on December 30th. If you missed it, you missed 6 bottles that were raffled off of a variety of wonderful spirits to start the holidays the right way. We want to give a shout out to our educational sponsors as well: Linux Training Academy, Cybersecurity Collaborative, Linux Foundation, and Wombat. There are discounts available to ISSA members, and we thank these organizations for sharing their information with us and our members. We try to put only interesting things on social media. We will not spam or talk about the burrito I'm eating. We actually try to keep the content relevant. So join us on the variety of social media content is there for all of us. We want you to participate as well. So I hope we'll see you there. Please join us. We've got several meetings coming up. I just want to tell you about the next 3. We have a cybersecurity predictions for 2021 happy hour on January 28th. We have to do that one pretty quickly, otherwise we'll be accused of cheating because we're already into 2021. We have a red team workshop coming up on February 9th. We'll have a blue team later on. So those of you who are a bit more technical, you can enjoy some of that. And then we've got our old friend Terry Gold, who's an expert on physical security. He'll be giving a talk on February 17th. All this information is or will be on our website. And again, if you sign up, you'll get the notifications. Today's panel, you'll have the opportunity to type in your questions using an app. The MK is our moderator. He has access to that. So all you have to do is go to this website, app.sli.do. It's Slido. It's a strange looking URL, but trust me, it's safe. And then it just asks you to type in the code and just put in ISSA-LA. And then whatever you type, our panelists will see them and they can respond to your questions when they have a chance. So please do join us. It's the best we can do interactively. I know we'd love to be sitting around shooting beers and talking to our favorite law enforcement professionals, although they probably wouldn't be allowed to have a beer with us until after hours. But please do join in. I'm sure you've got some questions. There's a couple of things happening around the country lately. We want to welcome our wonderful panelists coming from a variety of different places, both physically and agency-wise. We've got Elvis Chan from the FBI, Sean Bradstreet from the Secret Service, and Joseph Oregon from the CIA, from the CISA. So I want to really thank you, folks. I'm going to step back because you guys have heard enough from me today, and I want to turn it over to MK, who works at Palo Alto. However, he's former law enforcement, and I've seen him speak several times and really loved what he had to say. He was very forthcoming, highly intelligent. And he was supposed to be speaking at our security summit last May, and we had to cancel that. So I've asked him to come back and kind of recreate a law enforcement panel that we've been both working on for quite some time. And MK, thank you for doing it and bringing together these wonderful folks. So love to have you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for the handoff, Rich. Appreciate the introduction. And for those of you watching and attending this particular session, welcome. As Rich indicated, my name is MK Palmore. I'm a VP and Field Chief Security Officer with Palo Alto Networks. I am also a retired FBI agent. And so I appreciate the opportunity to bring in a few of my former colleagues to really talk to you guys. One, demystify some myths that are out there about what law enforcement engagement looks like as it relates to cybersecurity investigations. And secondly, talk about some of the topical issues certainly impacting information security practitioners now, and how federal law enforcement plays into some of these. And if we're lucky, before the end of the discussion, maybe we will get into a little bit of current topical issues, like some aspects, at least those that are already available and easily consumed, about the SolarWinds breach. And then of course, the events happening in Washington, DC, maybe there's some cyber components that we can tease in throughout the conversation. So appreciate your attendance here. Thanks for joining in. The stage is really set. Cybersecurity over the past year has not only grown in prominence, but the emphasis on technology for most enterprises now front and center for the vast majority of organizations around the planet. And you cannot have discussions about technology, you can't have discussions about digital transformation without talking about cybersecurity. And so immediately, when you begin talking about the impact of breaches, what enterprises could be doing better in order to protect themselves, what are the key things that security practitioners should be thinking about as they protect enterprises, I know of very few sources of information outside of federal law enforcement that have such topical observations and information as it relates to what they are seeing on the threat landscape, what enterprises are experiencing. And again, I mean, these are the guys and gals that respond to a large number of enterprise breaches. So they get to see up close and personal what challenges folks are dealing with, and really kind of talk a little bit about some of the themes that they see woven in and out. So we're lucky to have this panel with us. I'm going to give an opportunity for these guys to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with, as they are on my screen, Sean Bradstreet, who's an ASAC for the U.S. Secret Service. I see Elvis Chan, an ASAC for the FBI, Assistant Special Agent in charge of the cybersecurity teams in the FBI San Francisco, and Joseph Oregon, who's the regional representative for CISA. So Sean, if you wouldn't mind, a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and your background.
Yeah, well, good morning or afternoon, evening, everyone. MK, it's always good to see you again, and I appreciate the invite to join everyone today on the panel. But just so you're familiar, the Secret Service, obviously people are definitely more familiar now than ever with our protective duties that we do. But another big aspect that we do is actually protecting, the financial side. So with that being said, I've actually been here in San Francisco district for the last 7 years. I was a supervisor over our cyber fraud task force here in San Francisco. Then I went down to our San Jose office and, ran our office down there, which covers Silicon Valley. And now I'm back up in San Francisco, kind of running operations for Northern California. So I won't go into to that much more detail, but I came from DC, so I had some experience back there. From our criminal investigative division, our protective divisions back there. And I'll turn it back over to you, but I'm glad to be here and see everyone today.
All right, welcome, Sean. Elvis.
All right, thanks, Malcolm. So my name's Elvis Chan. I was actually just recently promoted into Malcolm's old job. Malcolm used to be my boss, and now I get to hold the seat that he does. So Assistant Special Agent in charge for FBI San Francisco means that I manage the cyber branch. And so the cyber branch is comprised of investigative personnel that manage all of the different cyber investigations we have, both national security and financially motivated. We also do digital forensics, right? So we have a digital forensics computer lab down in Menlo Park. And then we also handle technical operations. So if we are tracking a terrorist and we need to slap a tracker on, or if we are trying to find a cell phone, like we've got the guys who are rolling out trying to track cell phones to geolocate someone who's a terrorist or a kidnapper. And so that's just a little bit of what we do here at FBI San Francisco. I hand it back to you, Malcolm.
All right, thanks, Elvis. Joseph.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Oregon. I work for CISA, it's the Cyber Infrastructure and Security Agency, and I am the acting chief cybersecurity advisor for Region 9, which is the states of California, Nevada, Arizona, and Hawaii. So I operate out of the SoCal area and assist in managing reach, incident response, and a list of other responsibilities here for our region. And I've worked very closely with our partners at the Bureau, Secret Service, local law enforcement, and several of our panel members throughout the years. And I look forward to our presentation today. Thank you. Excellent.
So as you can tell, we have a deeply experienced team from both a practitioner and leadership standpoint. One of the things that just sort of ease us into this conversation I want to start off with is having each of the panelists talk a little bit about what the focus looks like for their particular agency as it relates to cybersecurity. I know in my time now in the private sector, there's a lot of confusion on private sector side in terms of who handles what, who's responsible for what in the cybersecurity realm. So, without any butting heads or carving out lanes, if you guys could just talk a little bit about what your agency responsibilities look like on cybersecurity. And why don't we start back off with Sean?
Yeah, thank you. So I would say, to generally answer the question, if you're not sure, I would definitely reach out to someone. And we'll definitely get you into the right agency if for some reason it's not in our lane. But specifically for the Secret Service, we used to be part of the Treasury Department. So our primary mission is to secure the financial infrastructure. And that deals with all the financial transactions that take place. And it doesn't really matter what mechanism that takes place on, whether it used to be cash, whether we moved to credit cards, whether we moved to wire transfers, and now especially with digital currency and cryptocurrency kind of coming into play. So we deal anything with the money aspect of it. We also deal with your personal identifiable information. So obviously people want your date of birth, your social security number, and all that information to actually open fraudulent accounts and to actually begin stealing that type of money. So that's really kind of the lane that we fall in, our financial crimes. So anytime we do network intrusions, computer forensics, it's usually because it deals with the theft of money or the transfer of some illicit money laundering or anything to that aspect.
Okay, Elvis.
With that, I'll pass it over to Elvis, I guess.
Yeah. So the Bureau, so the FBI also handles financially motivated cyber crimes as well. I would like to say, especially more recently, we play nicely, right? There's definitely overlap, but here in the San Francisco area, there's way too much work for both of us to handle. So really, there's not any need for turf wars. I think it may be different in other regions, but I do think it's better now. So yes, the FBI also handles financially motivated crime. The thing that's unique to our agency is we're the lead investigative agency for any national security computer intrusion. So if the Chinese or the Russians or the Iranians are conducting any hacks against your companies or other types of organizations, the FBI is the lead agency to handle that. And so I guess we'll talk a little bit later about why isn't Sean Bradstreet's crew working the FireEye/SolarWinds investigation? And I can now tell you that it's publicly been said by the US government that it's because we think it's the Russians, right? And so yes, there are Russian criminals, but if there are Russian state-sponsored actors, and that's where the FBI comes into play. So that's the big differentiator. But really, I work with Sean and Joe all the time anyway, and we play nicely together. And I would like everyone to know that San Francisco is definitely one of those post 9/11 locations where you don't have the stovepipes going on.
Excellent. Joseph, you want to weigh in here, what your agency does and what your lanes are?
I appreciate it, MK. Yeah, so I'm going to have to first say you're going to have to please excuse my internet. My bandwidth is having a little bit of an issue. So if I do cut out, just be a little patient with me.
It's the Chinese.
They're focusing in on our conversation. Well, our mission at CISA is not a law enforcement. We're not a law enforcement entity. And that's the big, I guess, the differentiator here with our panel members and our guests. We leverage our partners at the FBI and HSI, local law enforcement, Secret Service, to kind of juggle those responsibilities. Our mission and at CISA is the focus is kind of focused on leading the nation's effort to understand and manage risk to our critical infrastructure. And that's where our main bread and butter, if you will. We do work with our partners at the FBI and Secret Service and other agencies to deliver services and work together on different incidences when they're large in scope. So we do have, and kind of like Elvis mentioned, we do have our overlap where we get to work together. But our agencies have different mission sets, but we do our best to understand those lanes and then leverage each other's strengths. So a lot of what we offer at CISA and to our stakeholders is in the form of resiliency building, assessments, cyber best practices, kind of everything left of boom, if you will.
Okay, perfect. So here's a first question to sort of tee up and start this conversation. One, I appreciate the insights you guys just provided on your agency-specific responsibilities. But one of the things I remember from my time in the Bureau was seeing so many different snapshots of organizations and agencies sort of experiencing right of boom, what happened after the fact, and then sitting in on the postmortem and discussions about what folks could have done or what they should be doing better. If each of you wouldn't mind talking about sort of what are the top one or two priorities for InfoSec practitioners that you see again and again in terms of the investigations that you encounter that where folks should be leveling up either their capabilities or InfoSec practices. And I'll just throw that out to the three of you and anyone who wants to weigh in on that.
So I'll be the first one to chime in. So I would say number one is people don't even practice the basics. And I'm sure Sean and Joe will go along with me on this, especially now that we're all working remotely. Not using multi-factor authentication to be able to get into whatever platforms, that's number one, right? Like password spraying still works because people use, the same password across all their different types of accounts. I would say number two, and I'll even throw it out there before you do, is there are supply chain issues, right? So really people like say know your customer. I would say know who are your vendors, know who are the suppliers that you use. And the perfect example is FireEye, right? So FireEye had a very significant breach and they were able to determine that it was one of the vendors that they use, SolarWinds, right? That was the cause of the breach that they had. And so being able to have good auditing practices and good knowing your suppliers. And even when you know them, right? Like FireEye, they know who their customers are. Even when you do that, there's a 10% chance that you're going to get compromised anyway. So being able to have resiliency, I think that's the third thing. And then I'll open it up to the other two guys.
Yeah, and I'll just add on, I completely agree. Elvis, I'm glad you started off, but the basics, it always really comes back to the basics. To add on to that basics, I would especially say with COVID, businesses are more transferring, people working from home. And with that, there's becoming a big mix between personal devices and official work devices and people emailing between devices. Using Wi-Fi, like trying to build an additional areas of protection, make sure your company is using a VPN, especially with the crossover that is going on between personal and business devices here just recently. Another big point that I just want to bring out that we've seen this a lot and some of the breaches is at the senior management level when you got criminals that are actually inside your network and they're monitoring traffic, sometimes they're monitoring emails and text messages, anything on your IT department. It's always good to have what we call a shadow IT plan. And a shadow IT plan is your upper management, your senior management who needs to communicate to actually have a communication platform that is separate from your IT department. So it would look like everyone from the C-suite or everyone from the IT department working off their personal devices, working off in a separate app. And it could be Slack, WhatsApp, MS Teams, but just having that communication that is offline and segregated from your work IT in case you guys actually are infected. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up, but that's all I have.
And I think that is huge, Sean, with regards to out-of-bands communication. And it's a great business practice, as part of a business continuity, and just having those emergency communications on standby for when, forbid that defecation hits the oscillator moment for your organization, and being able to communicate in those times of operational distress is crucial for organizations, and their ability to recover quickly or manage their incident effectively. So that's huge. And I would also have to agree with Elvis's perspective as well. I would probably just add that with regards to personnel and training, I think training is huge. And sometimes, as we're kind of, working in a very difficult environment, making sure that we maintain some of the basics, those best practices, making sure our personnel are trained up, ensuring that that our training is still, that we continue to train and ensure that we can convey the importance of to our executive teams to have the right personnel trained, have the right personnel in the positions to start managing operational risk effectively. And we all see the shortages across the board with regards to IT. So making sure that, that we take the time to home grow that internally, making sure that everyone from, your basic operator or your basic, employee, your day-to-day employee, is trained up all the way to, your information security and your IT folks in-house are, all have that proper training.
So great answers. Cybersecurity fundamentals continue to reign supreme. Joe, let's stick with you for a little bit. Thinking about your original comments about risk frameworks and sort of the investment left of boom that folks need to be making in their enterprise. Can you talk a little bit about the risk frameworks that CISA uses to both evaluate and provide advice as it relates to maintaining infrastructure, and maybe one of the top one or two areas where there's obstacles for organizations to overcome?
MK, I'm gonna have to ask you to pass that question initially, because I had some lag and I did not hear that question.
Okay, so I'm talking about risk frameworks and essentially the types of frameworks and what advice that you guys offer to organizations in terms of how is it that you map out your security apparatus? What do you need to be thinking about in terms of cybersecurity resiliency, and what frameworks you might be using in order to ensure not only that you have those foundational pieces in place, but as you guys indicated, the ability to respond and mitigate an incident following really is the difference between life or death for organizations from an operability standpoint. So just talk about that investment left to boom and what you guys recommend organizations need to be doing. And if Joseph can't hear,
so with regard to, but please forgive me. My internet connection is. With regards to left of boom and for resilience, for resiliency, first I think it's huge to first understand what are the critical factors for your organization and under or critical services for your organization, and understanding how your organization's built up its resiliency around those critical services is a first step. And having the right personnel, being able to communicate in advance with partners to have those points of contact, irregardless if there are external dependencies, managing, those partners, with your net or that participate, in your day-to-day, participate with your organization, understanding, external partner sets that you may need and during a time or a situation of operational distress, understanding who your points of contact at the Bureau, Secret Service, CISA. So when things kind of go a little south, you do have those points of contacts, and they should be baked into your emergency communications underneath business continuity. Those best practices for business continuity is where I tend to see a lot of our.
Oh, I think we're missing some gems here from Joseph. As he gets back into the flow here, Elvis and Sean, you guys want to pick up some of the thought leadership here. Joseph, we'll circle back. Elvis.
So, yeah, I think Joe hit it on the head. Number one is know what are the crown jewels, right? And being able to protect those. And then just setting up the basic practices, which are the things that Sean and I told about. I don't want to bore you guys with like, let's talk about SP 800, 171. Like we don't need to talk about any of that. Like if you're interested in the NIST standards, obviously that's the government framework. The US government framework uses that, but there's kind of ISO equivalents but in terms of framework, I do think that the DHS CISA site has the best information. If you go to CISA.gov, like, all of the FBI stuff is just in lockstep. And I won't speak for you guys, Sean, but you're technically a part of DHS too. So I would think that we're all locked in on the same framework.
Yeah, it does have a great framework there. Also, science and technology, they also have a good framework that they also push out. But yeah, just like they said, you got to really know what you really want to mitigate risk-wise, what you're willing to transfer as far as your risk, and then what you're really able to accept. And then putting those controls or practices in place, to deal with your different risks. That's going to be different for every single organization.
Okay.
Yeah, and that you guys covered everything.
Hey, so prior to SolarWinds, which I'm sure, especially for Elvis, taking up a ton of time, maybe even for Joseph, what are the top one or two threat vectors or modalities that you guys sort of saw continuously hitting home, hitting business enterprises over the course of 2020? That the stuff that should be keeping practitioners up at night that maybe surprises you.
I'll start with that one. So when everyone migrated home because of COVID, the one thing people didn't seem to be prepared with was having up-to-date equipment, right? Having their laptops properly patched, having VPN connections. That seemed to be me the biggest surprise was that I thought people would be better with that. But and there's like the regular low-level password spraying and credential stuffing things that are going on. But for me, like if you're just a little bit more sophisticated as a bad guy, that there's so many unpatched CVEs. And that's the thing, especially like Windows, like O365. Oh my God. Like, I don't know if Sean's seeing this too, but we've seen a lot of people like just using vulnerabilities and O365 to get in. And then once they're in, they're just moving around wherever they want, making sure that they've compromised like the sexier O365 accounts, definitely in the C-suite and then like the people in finance. But that's the one thing that's really struck me for last year.
Okay, so lack of provisioning on home systems and secure configurations, patches. Sean?
Yeah, and with alongside that, I would also say, a lot of people use their cell phones now as security devices, which is good. The initial thing is obviously for phone or email communication. But now, we all recommend two-factor authentication. It's always good to get that text message, that SMS message. But with that being said, we're seeing a huge increase in SIM swapping. So your cell phones are actually they can be easily changed or controlled through social engineering through the telecommunication companies. Or we're seeing a lot of internal employees that can be bad, that can be SIM swapping, which means the information that is associated with your phone can be easily transferred to a suspect's phone. And then they've got your phone in SMS, so then they're able to go in there and change emails, get the SMS code, start getting control of the emails, they start getting control of bank accounts, digital currencies. So we're starting to see a lot of theft take place through the mobile devices. Especially during this time.
Right. So let me switch gears a little bit. There was one question that popped up in the Slido chain. Give you guys an opportunity to talk a little bit about some practical advice for folks. The question has to do with someone who's in the midst of a refi And they, electronically, I'm sure, are providing a tremendous amount of personal information to mortgage companies and things like that in order to go through normal life and day-to-day processes. Any recommendations just about, from the consumer standpoint, protecting yourself? Like, how should you go about communicating with financial organizations like banks and mortgage companies or healthcare entities that might require you to exchange your personal data and information via your phone and other devices remotely?
Yes, so I'll start on that one real quick, just because we see it so often. So the big thing is when you're communicating with an individual, you want to always make sure you can see their whole email address up at the top to make sure a business email compromise. And that's where they're actually going in and setting up a separate domain, like Palo Alto, and changing it to P, instead of it being PALO, they change it to POLO, and they set up a fraudulent domain. And people are falling for that constantly. I can't even imagine the billions that are actually being transferred out through business email compromise scams. But anytime you're communicating with someone, make sure you know who you're communicating with. And then also, if they're requesting, like, hey, send this additional, send this money elsewhere, or anytime there's a change that takes place, make sure that happens by voice, and make sure you have a communication that goes on. And you're not going from a link that they send you from that could be a phishing scam, that you're going back to some of the original conversations that go on. Because some of these suspects are getting really good about copy and pasting previous emails and putting them into to newer ones. So it's really up to everyone to be vigilant. But anytime you see a change in accounting information or an unusual request, you should take the extra time to actually scrutinize it, and don't hesitate to get on the phone.
I completely agree with Sean. And actually, I mean, this is a good question because I just went through a refi, right? Like, interest rates are absurdly low right now. And I was super paranoid, and I agree with Sean. Like, you need to, so we're doing most of the stuff on email, but I had our refi, our mortgage broker's phone number, right? And, he wants to close this deal. So I'm like calling him on the cell. Like, did you just send this email? Is this what this email says? Because it's got a link, and they say, oh yeah, Elvis, or you can go to the portal. And I was like, I would rather go to the portal, right, than click on this link. And it does seem like at least some of the more reputable mortgage brokers are having you go to a portal, right, a secure portal. You can see the HTTPS where you are putting your documents in a portal as opposed to just emailing. Right. And so that was one thing that gave me some level of comfort too. The other thing I would mention is I freeze my credit, right? I recommend everyone here freeze your credit until they need to like check your credit score. And I was like, hey, like, Bob, when are you gonna check my credit score? And they'll say, I'm going to check it between this time and this time. And so with all three of the credit rating agencies, you can automatically let it go, like unfreeze your credit, let them do the check, and then just freeze it again, like within 20 minutes, right? And so that's what I ended up doing, because he didn't tell me he was checking my credit. He tried to check my credit and it blocked him, and then he had to call me, which made me feel better, because that's the way it should be.
Process is working. Joseph, you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, please. Yeah, and I would probably say, because you are transferring a lot of paperwork back and forth, encrypt your documents. If you have the ability to encrypt up your PDF, utilize encryption for your PDF, and then send the information in that manner. And don't forget to use a VPN. Some of the basics that we do day to day, there are tons of VPNs that you can utilize in order to protect your communication while in transit. So some of those best practices that we might use at work, try to utilize those and leverage those same practices at home on the personal level.
Hey, so let's tease that out a little bit. I know that one of the challenges when working in government is that you don't want to be seen as promoting specific vendors and their particular tools. But Joseph, your comment about VPN usage, dead on. Without naming vendors, are there any other types of tools that you guys would recommend that consumers should employ on their personal systems that could be helpful in at least creating additional obstacles for adversaries? And again, you don't have to mention vendors, but if you want to talk about, again, tool sets or types of tools, Elvis, mentioned one of my favorite at the top of the conversation, multi-factor authentication. Obviously, if you're not using MFA, throughout your personal usage, either on sites where you have credit cards or sites where you expend money, you're leaving yourself open to potential attacks. So MFA is like a given, number one probably at the top. What else? Sites are still, password management still continues to be an issue. Password management tools, I always recommend those for consumers. Anything else on the list for you guys?
I'll take a shot at that. I think because a lot of us are working from home, making sure that your home environment is secure. So any type of application that allows more control on your home network to identify MAC addresses, IP addresses, anything that adds additional security and depth, or anything that's stacking your security, is definitely something you want to, leverage. Also kind of subnetting, if you can, your home environment. So your kids are playing on a network and you're working on another network. So you're minimizing any type of crossover. Anything with regards to those type of control mechanisms is something I would definitely highly recommend.
So network segmentation, not a surprise, right? The same thing that you guys are doing in your practitioner environments, folks should be trying to replicate at home. Great stuff, Joseph. Elvis or Sean, any additional comments on that?
No, I just want to kind of reiterate. I would say passwords, using a password app is a great thing to use. And I would actually spend a little bit of money to actually pay for a password service or application. The ones that are free, they're usually harvesting your information. So I would pay just a little bit of money, make sure you get a password app that actually generates that stuff. That's one level. Using two-factor through SMS is another level. Using authenticating apps, that's kind of a little level higher. And then they actually got security keys out there, security sticks. That's actually a level higher. Some of that stuff becomes more inconvenient, of course, and I understand that, but the level of security kind of goes up the more inconvenience you make it. So
awesome. Elvis, you want to
No,
tie
that's
this up?
good. No, those guys, they did a great job. Let me go way back to the basics. The number one vulnerability in your home is your wireless router, right? So I would at least recommend, if you don't want to go too much higher, don't use the default password on your wireless router. The bad guys know how the algorithms work, and they can just, they can use password crackers to try to figure that out. So definitely keep the same length and, the same mixture of, characters, letters, digits, special characters, but you should change it. Do not leave it on the default password.
Yeah, a lot of folks get intimidated about sort of messing around with naming conventions for Wi-Fi routers and things like that. But they should get beyond that, because what you're saying is important stuff just for protecting yourself. You guys have exposed quite a few nuggets. Hey, we had a question from one of the listeners about whole disk encryption. Any thoughts about data encryption as it relates to your personal information?
If you want to do that, that's good. I mean, on bureau computers, we have to do that, right? So all of our laptops have whole disk encryption on them, so that if, someone ends up stealing a laptop because I leave it in my car, but Malcolm knows I never leave it in my car, right? Like it's a brick to other people. So if you want to be able to do that, I definitely think whole disk encryption is another safety practice that people should use.
Okay.
And one thing that I also do personally, and this really comes in when I do my taxes or anything, I've actually got an external drive that is obviously encrypted.
Yeah.
I plug it into my network only when I'm saving or transferring or moving files, and I keep it unplugged. So that's kind of like the safe haven. If it gets stolen, that's fine, it's encrypted, but I never keep it on or open to the network. I only turn it on when I get to transfer stuff in.
Awesome. So we're talking about air-gapped devices in your home. Great. Hey, a question came in from one of the attendees about small businesses. I know from my historical time in the Bureau, there's a gap between large-scale enterprises that turn to you guys for help and small businesses. Who should small businesses be talking to? Who do they reach out to in order to better protect themselves, to take hard looks at their vulnerabilities and things like that? Because I know, and I'll let Elvis answer this. I mean, there's not an unlimited number of resources in federal agencies. And so some of this stuff goes unnoticed in small businesses, which create, well, actually the small businesses are the vast majority of enterprises out there. What are these folks, who should they be turning to? What should they be doing in order to protect their assets?
So I would say at the very least, like if you're a small business, you're going to have a vendor that you're using, right, for your internet service. People never seem to avail themselves. Like they should, when they're kicking the tire, on the ISPs, kicking the tires, what are you actually signing up for? What are they willing to give you, right? And so it's going to be limited, right? So I think if people who own small businesses, they're already hustling. I am asking them to do one more hustle, right? Because if you're a small business owner and if you suffer a loss or if you suffer some sort of like outage, like you could be done, right? Like I think Malcolm and I both like to say, if you've had some sort of significant breach or outage, you will be out of business in the next 6 months. And so know what your ISP is saying, and then avail yourself of the free information that is on ISSA.gov, right? Like they have a lot of really good basic information. FBI.gov does as well. And I know the service does as well, but there's a lot of good free information. If people just followed the basics that we've already talked about, using a VPN, using MFA, you would handle, that would be like 90% of your issues, because I will be the first one to tell you, the Chinese do not care about your mom and pop business that is, pulling in, $1 million in revenue a year, right? Like they just don't care. However, bad guys are going to care, and they know that there's this kind of sweet spot that's in between what local law enforcement can handle and what federal law enforcement can handle. And they just kind of eat in that little gap in between. But if you are doing the basic stuff, then you will be able to help yourself.
Awesome. Any additional thoughts from Joseph or Sean on that?
Yeah, I would think identifying any areas or any groups that provide free training. InfraGard is a great sector that, or is a great partner that provides sector training and some IT training with regards to best practices, etc. I used to be a chair on the IT sector for the San Diego InfraGard chapter, and we've held small medium business like training opportunities for our local businesses, where we kind of cover some of the tool sets that small businesses can utilize and leverage that are open source and free, that cost nothing but provide you additional value with regards to securing your infrastructure. Even at the small medium business level, I think that's invaluable. So identifying some of those meetup groups, some of those IT groups in your local area that provide your ISSA-LA, ISC Square. There's a number of them that do provide some of that training, and I would definitely look to leverage those.
I didn't pay Joe to plug InfraGard either. So.
that was a really good plug, Joe, for InfraGard.
And the corollary Secret Service group, Electronic Crimes Task Force. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah. So we actually just kind of rebranded here recently, but we got the cyber fraud task forces that actually we encourage, you to contact the one that is in your area. We've got 40 of them throughout the US here, very similar to InfraGard. And, if you sign up there, we probably push it out about once a week, some of the more recent vulnerabilities. And it will come from InfraGard, it'll come from the FBI, it will come from DHS CISA. We push all that stuff out through our cyber fraud task force. But at the end of each one, they usually have mitigation strategies that you can put in place. They usually have anywhere from 5 to 10 bullet points that are really good. If you don't really understand all the lingo, hey, go to those bullet points at the bottom of those alerts and see if your mitigation strategy is kind of up to date. But that's great.
Awesome. So let me double click on something that Elvis mentioned when we were talking about ISPs. Again, for small businesses, one of the things I think the small businesses miss out on or fail to ask about are, as Elvis was describing, the deeper questions about what specific cybersecurity services do you provide in addition to providing me internet connectivity? And what you'll find is that nearly all of them, AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, all have additional packages with which offer small businesses enhanced cybersecurity services. You have to think of it like a virtual firewall that sort of observes all of the information that's coming into your small business environment and providing you protections. And some of them provide even additional pains and control measures so that you can go in and make individual decisions upon what you want coming into your enterprise and what kind of additional controls you want to add. So I just wanted to say that explicitly. The ask here, again, about small businesses, take that extra step, contact your ISP and talk to them about additional cybersecurity measures that, of course, none of this comes free, but I'm sure there's packages and stuff associated that small businesses can do. And that levels up your capabilities without having to go out, get some small consulting firm to come in and give you observations that you should already know about. But it, again, levels up your capabilities in a quick way.
And let me triple tap on what Malcolm just said is you think, oh, well, I can't afford that. I need to save money. I can't afford the enhanced package, but that's being penny wise, pound foolish, because if you don't get that and then something happens, like I said, there is a more than 50% chance you will be out of business in 6 months, right? If you suffer a loss of all of your clients' financial information, do you think they're really going to come back to you, right? So that's definitely something that you need to think about.
Awesome. Hey, on the tail end, we got a question from one of the attendees about hardwiring internet versus Wi-Fi, and just any open thoughts about being hardwired into the router as opposed to using Wi-Fi.
I personally am a Luddite, although we do have a wireless router. I would say Malcolm is on the higher end of technology implementation, and I am on the lower. I don't have Nest, I don't have Ring, I don't have any IoT devices in my house, just because those are other access points. And I think all the guys here know there are no cybersecurity standards for IoT devices. There's zero. I mean, there are different organizations trying to come up with standards, but there's nothing that's universal at this point. So yeah, like if you're going to be a Luddite, then that's safer. It would be even safer not to have a phone. but I mean, I know we all have to do one. So I'll let the more expansive guys discuss why I'm a big dummy.
Okay. So let's take a step back for a second. The question from the small business owner about protections really brings up a concept about public-private sector cooperation. You guys mentioned InfraGard. You mentioned the, and my apologies, Sean, I'm not up to your renaming convention just yet, but I know you got cyber task forces out there. You're asking folks to participate. Joseph, anything from the ISSA in terms of public and private sector cooperation that you guys are asking for?
I guess the big one's information sharing. When we're looking at private sector and working with U.S. government entities, information sharing is a huge one, right? So addressing what that might mean to your organization at the policy level and being able to kind of bake in what your expectations would be to share that information with U.S. government entities, whether that's through your MSI-SAC, CISA, your bureau, your local fusion center, et cetera. Kind of understanding what the do's and don'ts for your organization and with regards to sharing information, and then share the information as best as you possibly can. I know right now, and it's a kind of a soapbox for me, but we're starting to see a lot of cyber insurance companies that are putting stipulations within their contract or within a clause to their customers to kind of minimize some of the sharing of information, even as it pertains to U.S. government entities. And so I would ask those organizations as well as our cyber insurance businesses to kind of take a look at what is responsible to share and being able to provide those details. And I think that with regards to how to participate and how to work with U.S. government entities, that would be a great bang for the buck for us. And just speaking with CISA in particular, and because those are the details that we need with regards to getting or trying to stay current or get ahead of potential problems that might be on a larger campaigns scale. So the more details, the more information we have, the better or the easier it is for us to respond and then disseminate that information. So we're protecting each other at an almost tribal level where, we're on a constant communication and we're working together effectively to kind of share those details.
Awesome. Hey, so let's switch gears here a little bit. I'm going to try and toe the line. You guys are going to help me. I'm going to ask you some questions about some relatively relevant and timely things. And if you have to pass on contributing to the answer, that's fine. I'll try and, again, pose these questions to you in a way that allows you to answer. An event like SolarWinds happens, right? And people see that there is a response by the federal government in terms of, one, looking internally at internal stakeholders, assets, and trying to figure out whether or not you're compromised, but also what help then can be provided to the outside in the way of briefings and threat intelligence and that kind of thing. Without talking about specifics and only dealing with publicly available information, talk a little bit about sort of the all hands on deck effort that something like a SolarWinds breach means to cybersecurity investigative teams. And I'll pitch that to Elvis because I know that he has probably a personal take on that.
Yeah, so FBI San Francisco, we are the lead office for this investigation. We're working closely with 2 other field offices that have a piece of the pie as well. But there is a significant interagency coordination. There are daily phone calls, just so everyone knows, between the FBI and CISA, right, at the headquarters level, and with the NSA and with Department of Defense, right? And so we're really focused on the national security issues. You know, I'm glad the U.S. government came out with it was actually CISA and FBI came out with the statement that was attributing this to the Russians, right? And so I want people to know, like, from a private sector point of view, you were vulnerable as well, except depending on what sector you're in, the Russians are probably not as interested in your information, right? And so that's no offense to you, right? But at the end of the day, you know, Russia has a finite amount of resources, and where are they going to focus them on the secrets that the U.S. government has? Is typically that's why there is an all hands on deck mentality right now. And I would say that there's just a lot of stuff going on. Trying to coordinate, you know, the FBI does the investigation part, and then CISA does the remediation and, you know, providing guidance on that end. So being able to work closely, it's a daily and sometimes hourly coordination just to make sure that we're, you know, all moving in the same direction at the same cadence and at the same time. So hopefully that at least gets us started. And
yeah,
I guess I'll kick it off to Joe.
Yeah, I guess one of a big factor is also communication with our agencies and then providing those details back out to the public. You know, our agencies are working, you know, tirelessly, as Elvis kind of highlighted there, to kind of get ahead of this, not ahead of, but trying to catch up to the issue, right? And being able to really understand. And sometimes that can leave our private sector partners kind of frustrated because of the information might not come out as timely as, you know, as they would like. But we are working as fast as we can to try to provide details that are solidified workarounds or any type of remediation to address questions that are effective in assisting. So being able to communicate, you know, those details might take a little bit of time, but rest assured that we are, and as Elvis mentioned, you know, working with each other hourly, even minutely sometimes, to kind of understand what it means. And it's not just for the organization, but what it means to on a national level as well, right? Because you're talking across the United States, how it's impacting, who it's impacted, those partner sets, how they are, you know, how they affect critical services or critical infrastructure, national security interests, et cetera. And this is going into a big pot of, oh my gosh. And then we're trying to get the information, we're trying to take that oxygen mask and pass it as quickly to, you know, to our partners, you know, the private sector, and to our partners as quickly as possible. But rest assured that we're doing our best to make sure that communication line is open to our stakeholders.
I do want to add onto what Joe was saying. He brought up a really good point. And people who know me know that I try to be as transparent as possible. And I try to be forward leaning, really sharing information so that private sector companies can protect their own platforms. However, let me tell you what's going on now. And I will be the first one to admit we are not sharing information fast enough. And the reason is all of the infrastructure is getting burned down before we can even serve legal process on it, right? So we're sending out preservation letters to at least get a snapshot of what the information looks like. And then after we get the legal returns, right? Like, is this still an active account? Did this get burned down? And if it's like something active, then we go directly to the company and say, hey, like your domain is beaconing back to this IP address that we just served a subpoena on. Like, so if you're not being contacted by us right now, then we don't think that your hair is on fire while ours still is. So it's not that we're not trying to share the information, but the infrastructure is getting burned down so quickly around us, and we're trying to, get all the way back to the hands behind the keyboard. That's the thing that's stopping us from being able to share more concrete IOCs indicators of compromise, is because by the time I give them to you, they're already gone, right? The actors have already moved on. So what's the point of me giving you indicators that they're not even using right now? So I just wanted to add on to what Joe said.
So from a impact to enterprise standpoint, and I sort of know the answer to this, but I want to tee it up for some feedback so someone can hear it from someone other than me. What's the probability that these modalities and methods of access that have now been opened via the SolarWinds breach actually finds their way into the hands of criminal adversaries? In other words, APT-focused attack, but yet the access and all the other sort of waterfall effect of something like this, what are the chances or probability of it falling into criminal adversary hands and us seeing again and again over 2021 and beyond the impact of a breach like this?
I can answer this, but I didn't know if Sean wanted to like.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I think I know where you're going with this, Malcolm. But actually, I want to be more reassuring to people, right? So the SolarWinds breach was the work of very sophisticated actors, and without getting into the details of how they were able to get their malware in and use actual security certificates from SolarWinds, right? Like, so I would say for this specific breach, it would be difficult for criminal actors to mimic it. However, there are other activities that the bad actors are also using that the criminal actors will be already using. And that's the O365 thing that I mentioned. We've seen a lot of O365 activities, specifically around SAML token abuse. I can't believe how many times like Joe and I say SAML token. I didn't even know what a SAML token was until before Thanksgiving. But if people go to Microsoft's blog website, they have super good guidance to explain what a SAML token is and all the types of all the vulnerabilities that they have in their own platform. That's where I think the actors are going to go, is still utilizing the O365/Microsoft as a vector to be able to get in, because that was definitely one of the potential vectors for SolarWinds. We're still working through how did the bad actors get in, and we've got a few things, and I won't comment on what the news is saying. They're naming all of these vendors that until a couple of weeks ago, none of us had ever heard of them. No offense to all of those companies, but that were not regular things on the radar.
Okay, so let me tie a bow on some of this. First of all, the stuff that Elvis won't talk about, there are a lot of vendors out there that have done some deep research on this and are openly providing this information via their own sites, webinars, that kind of thing. Palo Alto Networks is one of them. We've done the deep dive on this. There's information that you can go to our site, view one of the webinars. It's got a tremendous amount of threat intelligence if you want to deep dive into how the execute happened on this and how your systems may be impacted. So I'll leave that there. The other thing I want to do is sort of double click again on, I tried to tee this up for Elvis. He didn't exactly go where I wanted him to go, but historically, have we seen instances where APT related activity, again, found its way into the hands of criminal adversaries and then were able to exploit some of the availability of access or information related to breaches?
Okay, so absolutely, Malcolm. And so we have two specific examples, one of which happened while you were still the ASAC, right? So Yahoo breach, we have state actors, we had FSB officers who they were serving subpoenas on Yahoo. And of course, Yahoo's saying, this is coming from the Russian Federation. I'm not gonna comply with this. And so they got super angry. And they hacked into Yahoo, right, so that they could run their own investigations, right, on oil ministers from Eastern former Soviet bloc countries. But guess what? Russian FSB officers get paid really poorly. So they were lining their pockets by selling information on the side to Canadian pharmacy companies, you know? So if you noticed an uptick in spam from those Viagra ads or anything else, it's because Russian hackers who work for the government were trying to make money on the side. So when we indicted them, we actually indicted them for hacking into Yahoo and also for lining their pockets with, you know, by selling all of the hacked information to those Canadian pharma companies to be able to do that. And the Chinese, same exact thing. They work for the Chinese government, but at home on the side, they are also making money on their own. There's a lot of cryptocurrency, and I think we're gonna talk about this later, but a lot of cryptocurrency being stolen because Chinese hackers, guess what? They're trained by the Chinese. So they're super good hackers. They do spear phishing attacks, they steal credentials, and then they walk over and they steal all of the Bitcoin that you have in your digital wallet. So we see specifically with those two countries and Iran as well, there is an interplay between the criminal element and the state element.
Awesome. So I appreciate you teeing up the conversation around cryptocurrency, Bitcoin specifically. So let me set the stage as we wade into the digital currency conversation. I do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of presentations. Probably from the month of August through the end of last year, I have a specific slide in my presentation where I talk about the dark web marketplace and the value of things and that kind of thing. But I talk specifically about the value of Bitcoin. And with each presentation, I would go in the day of and look at the current value so that my value is updated. And don't hold me to this, but if we're looking at August to today, and I got on my other screen here, the current value today, when I first started tracking this was around the August timeframe, we were at probably a little over $11,000 in value for one Bitcoin. And today, as I look at the screen, $35,964 US dollars for one Bitcoin. What's the challenge here for you guys in terms of investigating crimes related to Bitcoin? Are we still seeing a lot of Bitcoin wallet theft, the use of digital currency on the dark web? What's that landscape look like right now? And I suspect Sean or Elvis
So
going to kick this off.
Yeah. So I'll start with this one. So I would say, you know, we've seen a huge rise. I mean, we're seeing more cryptocurrency now, you know, from year to year than we do from wire transfers or credit card or any other. So we have a big emphasis right now on digital currencies. With Bitcoin, we actually have the software and we've got the ability to trace it. So we do a fairly good job tracing it. When it's going through mixers or blenders, you know, and that's where it's basically they're trying to obfuscate it and send it off. Sometimes we have a lot of success still tracing that stuff, and sometimes not as much. Now, the difficulty that we actually have are actually with privacy coins. And those are coins like Monero-Zcash. They don't actually have a public you know, ledger for us to actually trace. So those become very difficult. With that being said, the criminals are starting to migrate to them. But the big advantage is a lot of the crypto exchangers, you know, internationally are starting to remove the privacy coins off their platform because they're trying to legitimize cryptocurrency. So we see we're seeing constantly a push and pull when it comes to that. But no, it's going to be really fascinating to see, especially when we start talking about DEX's decentralized exchanges and how they become more and more decentralized, and they're going to allow for decentralized financing, and it could really open up the whole world for the criminals, you know, when it comes to that.
I completely agree with Sean, right? Like, I know that digital currency, there's actually good, right? Like we're helping people who typically wouldn't be able to buy into the regular financial system to be able to get in and through their phones, right? So I think there is a good side of it, but you know, we're law enforcement, we're government, so we always just look at everything negative. I do see, this is Elvis calling my shot. I do see as cryptocurrency gets more legitimate, it will become more heavily regulated, right? And have all of the fiat that we as law enforcement like. So I like for it to be more legitimate because then it's going to have to start looking like more regular banking practices and, you know your customer kind of stuff. And it feels like we're moving in that direction right now. But we'll see. right? So at the end of the day, like Sean, I don't want to give away our secrets. We still have some pretty good success. I would argue for some of our cases, and I think the most recent one is the big Twitter hack that happened last year, right? It was being able to analyze the cryptocurrency chain, following the money back, that we were able to get the hackers.
Awesome. Joseph, I'm not sure if you want to weigh in on this topic of digital currency, but I have a sort of final question for you guys. And I'd like, Joseph, if you want to comment on the cryptocurrency thing, feel free to lead with that. But I will also ask you to sort of final question to each of you. And I'm asking for some thought leadership here about what portends for 2021 and beyond. If you could, one or two topics related to cybersecurity from your agency perspective that you want to leave the audience with.
Yeah, so with regards to cryptocurrency, and a lot of that was with regards to criminal element. So I just was going to pretty much take Elvis and Sean's kind of a lead in that area. With regard to the left of boom for CISA, and going forward to 2021 and 22, it's kind of doing your outreach, understanding who in your, as we're looking at left of boom and trying to build your resiliency, and trying to build the resiliency of our critical infrastructure, identify who your CISA reps are in your region. A lot of us pair ourselves up with, bureau partners and Secret Service as well. I know I have a great relationship with our folks down in Southern California and Northern California here. And our CSAs and our neighboring states also have great relationships. So reaching out to CISA or the Bureau to try to get a hold of CISA as well, but identifying who your reps are. Understand that we do have a wealth of services that we do provide our partners that are for free. We do have, assessments for critical infrastructure, government sector. There are training opportunities that we provide our partners as well, stakeholders, from tabletop exercises to your basic vulnerability assessment. And those are services that you can find online at CISA.gov. And it'll showcase a lot of our focus, a lot of what we're looking to assist our critical infrastructure when we're talking about building resiliency. And that's the big one for us, because if we can assist in better preparing our critical infrastructure, better preparing private sector, public, the better it is down the road for everyone involved. So I would say that would be my emphasis on CISA going forward.
Awesome. Sean.
And Joe, that's really good. I completely agree. So I just want to leave with this. I mean, I think the big thing is for you to contact somebody when you've got a breach or you're having issues. There's no problem. Like, I really like it with the trusted partners that we have that will call and run things by me, and we can talk things through. If they've lost a couple of million and they decide not to pursue it because they don't want to, because it's a business decision, whether they're worried about stock prices or whatever, it's good to have those discussions, but we can still help and give advice. If we end up taking it criminally, that's a decision that we're always open to have, because we definitely want to make sure we don't hurt a business additionally. Like, we are actually here to help. So the big thing is, hey, contact us, I would say sooner than later, just for open dialogue. And number two, I think this is really difficult when people have a breach in their system, they have a tendency to go and delete. They just want to like purge and delete everything. Well, you're also purging and deleting a lot of the evidence that we really need to prosecute. So it's always good when you can take the stuff offline or move it, but it's always good to preserve that evidence. So those would be a couple of main takeaways outside of what we talked about.
Awesome. Elvis, you want to bring this home?
Yeah, so Joe stole my thunder by talking about InfraGard earlier, but I'm going to call another shot and say, until everyone takes the vaccine, we're going to be stuck in this COVID-19 pandemic for quite a while, right? So everyone's going to be, teleworking. And so if you want training, if you're a small business, if you're a consultant, if you guys don't have the wherewithal, please join InfraGard. It's INFRAGARD, right? So it's no U's, it's just all A's, InfraGard. And And I'm assuming you guys are mostly in LA, but if it's either ISSA folks listening, just type in InfraGard and then whatever city you're in, because we have chapters in all 56 field offices. And so that would be number one. And then as Sean and Joe said, like you should know who your local law enforcement rep is at the federal level, right? And so I am on many folks, Rolodexes, and if you're here in the San Francisco Bay Area, happy to put you in touch with the right guy. If you're in LA, both Joe or I can put you in touch with the right folks down there. LA has InfraGard, and they also have this thing called Cyberhood Watch, which is a similar thing, but it seems like it's distinct to FBI Los Angeles. But definitely, it's good to call someone after an incident. It's even better to be able to call them when it's not Friday evening and your hair is completely on fire. Just to be able to know who your guy is, right? Or who your guy or your girl is before you have to pick up the phone and just call the FBI main line or the Secret Service main line and not have any kind of relationship. That's really kind of a bad way to go.
Awesome. Hey guys, Sean, Elvis, Joe, really appreciate your time today. I know that you guys are busy. I'm glad that I got you on the calendar well in advance before the world blew up and we all had to respond to some very different things. But I continue to appreciate your collaborative support and thanks for providing some gems and wisdom during this webinar today. Let me close with a couple items before I pass it back to Rich. And that is just from my standpoint, I've been doing a lot of talking towards the end of 2020, going into 2021 about the three things that I think are impacting security and securing environments. And they are all things cloud, automation, figuring out how to leverage that to the degree that you can, and then the concept of zero trust. If you guys want to get in touch with me, you can reach out through the Palo Alto Networks website or mpalmore@paloaltonetworks.com. And thanks for the opportunity to bring these talented public servants in front of you guys to talk about some very important matters related to cybersecurity. So I'll pass it back to you, Rich. Thanks, everybody.
Can everyone give them a round of applause? It's a virtual one, gentlemen. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming out and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. Listen, everybody, they're our partners, right? You try to do this alone, you will fail. So please remember, we've got these folks helping us. They're backed by, thousands of dedicated men and women. So please take advantage of that and share with them information you might have. And as soon as you suspect something at your company, please do reach out. I want to thank you all again for taking the time away. I know that a few of you are probably going to be traveling very soon. I want to wish you safe travels and good health to you and your families. And with that, everyone, please remember to join us on the 28th. There's a happy hour with more predictions. We'll see what those folks can come up with. In the meantime, fight the good fight, and ISSA-LA welcomes you. Share our videos with your friends. Our YouTube channel has lots of good stuff on it, and we'll hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, panelists.